All right, got it. Okay. So you can look at this statement and say, hey, if you can't lead, you can't lead if you can't listen. And you can look at it and say, well, you can lead if you can listen. And so if you've been leading for any period of time, you know that listening has got to be the greatest skill that you develop. Um, so go ahead, and we're having major technical difficulties if you couldn't already tell today. So just bear with us. I have zero internet. All right, so hard skills versus soft skills. So this is where we focus a lot of our time. So we know everyone on this call has hard skills, whether it is construction, it is combat, it is real estate transactions, it is fixing a car, right? So there's all these technical skills that you may have. And so what we're going to be focusing on are these soft skills, because you've probably heard it. We know soft skills make up 85 to 90% of overall career success. So what we want to do is let the different industries take care of their hard skills, and we're going to hone in on these soft skills. So today we're going to cover two, and they're self-awareness and behavior styles. So I'm going to go into that all through the lens of listening. Okay. Please click. All right, here's a poll question for you. People spend about 55% of their time listening. On average, what percentage of information do most people retain from listening? So you can go ahead and put it in the chat. And Becca, you're gonna have to read the chats to me because I can't see anything. All right. Anyone else? Okay. Very good. Okay, so A is correct, 20%. That's on average. So Heather and some of the people that you work with, it might only be 5%, especially with our kids. I think sometimes it might be 5%, but 20%, right? So if we're talking to somebody and we're spending that much time listening, we're not actually retaining that much information. And so listening, we are not only going to have to worry about how we listen, but also how other people listen. And so we're going to dive into that in just a sec. All right, listening types. So the first type of listening is, well, not listening, right? So there's zero effort involved here, and that's ignoring. The next, pretending. So this is like patronizing. It appears like you're listening, right? These might be those phone people. Like, I'll just use my kids as another example, right? How many times, and I'm not proud of this, but been on my phone and somebody's like asking me something and I'm like, yeah, sure. And then like 5 minutes later, I'm like, why are you doing that? They're like, I asked, you said yes. And I'm like, oh, I wasn't actually listening, right? So pretending. Now we've got selective listening, right? So this is like listening to parts of what somebody's saying, but you're not actually getting the whole big picture. Then you've got attentive listening, right? So this, a lot of people call it active listening. That's where you're paying attention, you're internalizing it. Thankfully, you've got this eye contact going on, which we did talk about earlier. Pet peeves of some people, they don't get that eye contact. And then you're reflecting and rephrasing. So this is saying, what I think I heard you say was this, or help me understand, did you mean this? Or let me rephrase that. And then the hugest type of listening, this is empathetic listening. So this is like a lot of energy goes into empathetic listening, because it takes like the mental energy, right? So you're processing information, but you're also connecting your emotion to it. So this is all about putting yourself in the shoes of the other person. So it's not just about a transaction, but also seeing it from another point of view. So today what we're going to focus on is this is the zone we want to be in. So we want to always have this nice blend of empathetic listening and attentive listening. If you're only in empathetic listening all the time, that can be a little bit dangerous because it can suck a lot of energy. It takes a lot of work to do. You'll see a lot of therapists and things like that. They're in that zone a lot. So they have to do a lot of self-care to combat that. But we want to this regular folks here, we want to balance empathetic and attentive listening. And so we're going to talk about that. So real quick, I think everyone on this call is at least somewhat familiar with DISC, but I'm going to explain it really quick. And I want this conversation is going to go two ways. First, we're going to look at it from our own point of view the first time through. I want you thinking about yourself and how you listen and how these styles tend to listen. Then we're going to go through it and we're going to say, okay, how do other people listen, other styles listen? And I want you thinking about it first yourself, and then I'll tell you when we're going to go through it again, but I'm going to go through it pretty quick. All right, our D styles, these are our eagles. We know they're dominant, they're assertive, they're decisive, direct, they're to the point. We've got our I styles, those are our parrots. They are more influential, social, very talkative. They're spontaneous in how they move, big, bright, loud people. We've got our S styles, those are our peacemakers. They're loyal, they're helpful, very consistent, steady relators. And we've got our C styles, those are our owls. They are logical, detailed, analytical, and objective. And so likely either you know which style you are predominantly, or you can pick up a couple of these things that might resonate with you. And so the good news is we're all a blend of all the things. It's more a matter of how much energy does it take to flex to these different styles. So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how these styles listen and what it looks like. So our eagles, they're bottom line listeners, okay? So if I am an eagle, I am only listening for the bottom line of a conversation. I don't want to get wrapped up in all the fluff, just get right to it. If I'm a parrot, they're responsive listeners, right? They listen with the intent to respond to you. So it's a very talkative transaction that happens between a person and a parrot. Our S styles are doves. Those are empathetic listeners. So that is why these people tend to be a little bit more reserved. They hold themselves back because there's a lot of emotion involved in their listening. And then we have our C styles, and these are comparative listeners, right? So they listen for either where you're wrong, or they're comparing data back and forth. So they want to see a lot of consistency. So is there anybody here who's like, oh, that's how I listen? That something stood out to you?
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks,
Christy.
I am an I and a D, just depending on where I'm at.
Okay.
High I and high D, but I'm usually in parrot mode.
Very good. Very
Which is
good.
what I just did, isn't it?
Yes, and I appreciate it. Yeah. So in Christy's case, and Christy knows a lot about DISC too, so this would be a really good. Let's talk about it for just a second, Christy. So I am an owl, right? So I'm a comparative listener. And so if we're having a conversation, depending on who is in the person who needs something out of the transaction, we'll just say that, right? So if I'm working with Christy and I'm trying to sell something to her, or I'm trying to get information out of her, my job is not to be in comparative listener land. My job is to flex, to be a responsive listener, because I'm going to look at Christy. I'm going to say she's got really cool hair. She's got bright clothes on. She likes to engage. She's very animated when she talks. If you meet her for 5 minutes, not on Zoom, you're going to see all this happen with Christy. So we know I can't stay the way that I am. I have to bring up my energy, and then I have to engage her in some responsive listening. And that's how I'm going to know she's engaged with me. Now, if she starts to drift from the conversation, that I start to shift, or she gets distracted and sees something else in the room that's more interesting, I got to go to bottom line really fast, right? Because I want to keep her attention. So this is all about, I need to know how I am, because if I stay in comparative listening, I'm going to lose her really fast. And I need to know who she is, because I've got to be that same thing. I've got to make sure I'm flexing, not in a fake way, but in a way that helps her so she can stay engaged in listening to me and not drift off and go somewhere else. Otherwise, I'm not doing her any good. So real quick, these types of listening, this ignoring, if you are a D style, you want to be really careful that you don't fall in ignoring land. Okay? Because if people don't get to bottom line fast enough for you, you are not listening anymore. The selective listening, we kind of all do that, and the pretending listening. But the owls, they are really good at attentive listening. So, but they're always looking for, like, trying to understand the data. So you can see how each one of these styles might flex into these different types of listening, but there's danger zones here for all of them. Okay. And so if you're not ready to listen to somebody, be respectful enough to take the time to have the conversation. And if you are, then just try to engage with them in the style that they listen. So, any questions about disc listening? Anything that came up that you want to discuss? Hey, Josh.
Hello, everybody.
All right. Josh, I'm going to ask Josh a quick question.
Yeah.
Since you're new to the room. Okay, Josh. I don't know when you hopped in, but if you look at these different types of listening styles, so empathetic listening, I'm listening with emotion; attentive listening, I'm actively trying to gather information; selective listening, I'm only listening to part; pretending, I'm sort of paying attention but not really; and ignoring, which is the biggest pitfall for you?
Well, I think I'm a high I. Probably attentive because I get distracted very easy, and my brain's always thinking of, the visionary brain is always thinking of new ideas, new this or new that, or what I'm gonna say next instead of going, what are they really saying? So I'm always thinking of the next topic or whatever. So I think that's the hardest for me.
That's so true. Okay. All right. Thank you for sharing that, Josh.
Yeah.
Let's do a quick poll, and then I'm going to talk about some ways that you might be able to fight that. All right. Quick poll. On average, poor listening habits and skills affect more than what percentage of employees? You can go ahead and put your answer in the chat. I think we got everybody. Okay, correct answer is C. The good news is that you knew that it probably does fall somewhere between 70 and 80%. But this is alarming. Okay, so we know that on average, you have to repeat something about 9 times before somebody actually hears you, knows about it, keeps it, commits it to memory. So when we're talking about leading people, it isn't that they are necessarily doing anything to be disrespectful or not honoring of the instruction, or, it's not usually that. It's usually just that there's so much information. The newer they are, the amount of information that they're trying to retain and work with and all that kind of stuff, it's too much for the brain to absorb, right? So we're talking about retention, like our first question, right? How much do we retain from what we hear? Is 20%. Okay, that's not just our staff, that's us too, right? So we got to remember that, whether it's a client, a staff member, however your business is set up. But it's really important that we give a little bit of grace when we're speaking with people, and that we don't get frustrated with people the first time we say things, or when we're trying to explain something. If people don't understand it, that's being human. That isn't being lazy. That isn't being not paying attention. It's not that. It's just being human, and we're just flawed, and that's the way it goes. So we have to be patient, right? So I know who's on the call today, so we got to really tap into the fruit of the spirit. So we can go there on this call, just so everybody knows it's a safe space here, because we know enough about everybody on this call to know we can go there if we need to. So some key takeaways. We know that we've got to be intentional, right? If you want to be heard and if you want to be a good listener, you've got to be intentional. So that means you've got to adapt. Okay. And it takes a lot of energy. We got to create the space, know who is in front of you and how they listen. If they are easily distracted, right? If we're talking to a parrot, we need to make sure that they don't have a lot of things that are going to cause distraction. Okay. If we're talking to an owl, I'm just going to go across the grid that way, then we need to make sure that we pay attention to what we're saying because they will hold you to all of it. And if there's inconsistencies in what you're saying, they're not going to believe you anymore and they're not going to trust you. Okay. If you're talking to a dove, you got to make sure that you are talking about how it's going to impact people, that you are a little bit slower and that you are moving at the pace that they want to move at. And if you're speaking with an eagle, get straight to the point, get it over with, and then walk away. All right. So we need to be able to flex, engage ourselves. We never want to stop learning. Look, there's blogs, there's, articles up the wazoo, journal articles, books. Please do your homework about listening because it is the one skill that's going to move you forward fast. And then practice the heck out of it because, this should be fun. This shouldn't be anything that you're like, oh my gosh, I had to listen to so many people that are different than me today. Or, I had to try to get them to listen to me and it was so much work. That shouldn't be it. Like, if you can make this something where you're like, you know what, I'm going to go give it a shot and I might mess it up a little bit today, but I'm going to go and I'm going to intentionally try to be a great listener, or I'm going to intentionally try to help the person that I struggle with listen to what we're talking about here. And I'm going to engage with them the way they need to be engaged with. Okay. Any questions about that? That was Fire Hose Listening 101. Any questions about listening before we get into our whiteboard segment?
Which one are you and Becca?
That's a good question. I am an active listener. I can be an empathetic listener too, but I am an owl. So I will hold everybody to everything they say all the time. And I got to watch that because sometimes, being the way that I am, I can be misjudging a situation or a person and then deciding that I don't trust them when they really just didn't decide yet what they wanted to do and they're just throwing ideas around. So that's just something I have to be really careful about, that I'm not too judgy, because that's not going to help me build a relationship with anybody, but I have to watch it. Mm-hmm. What about you, Becca?
So I'm kind of like Christy, where I flex in different environments. But first and foremost, I'm a dove. So I'm more of the empathetic listener. And so, like, something that I've heard is like, a lot of times if you go into a room where I am, maybe not at like a Christian chamber event, because I'm way more social in those settings. But if you're going anywhere else, a lot of times I'm not the one talking, I'm the one listening. And so I'm also always picking up social cues. So I can pretty quickly assess, because I'm paying attention to emotion. I'm pretty quick to pick up on like the social cues of, man, I think this person had a hard day, or based on their tone of voice. I'm like always paying attention to that stuff. So a lot of times I'll redirect my questions. So if I ask someone like, hey, how's your day going? And if they're like, it's all right, someone else might just overlook it, but I'm going to be like, tell me really what's going on. Like, and then I'm like really quick to engage with someone's emotions, because I want to like cut the BS, like tell me really how you're feeling. Tell me actually what's going on with you. Are you okay? So that's usually how I listen. Yeah. Great question. And it's always good to do that. Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. Whiteboard time.